Good afternoon. My name is Tony Bevilacqua, and I'm the founder and CEO of Cognitive 3D. We are a Vancouver-based spatial analytics platform that collects human performance insights on virtual, augmented, and mixed reality experiences. I'm here to talk to you today about a topic that's been really important for our customers over the last few years, and that's around deploying enterprise VR training at scale. Before we get started, I'd like to just thank our organizers of the VRAR Global Summit. We've been with them for many years and they put on a fantastic event. It takes a lot of effort to put something like this on. And special thanks to Anne-Marie and Chris Colo for putting these things together and their extended teams. So I wanted to go over quickly what we're going to cover today. There's a few kind of primary topics. I'm going to talk a little bit about transitioning from a VR training proof of concept to scale. So what are the pieces that are kind of involved in that? And what we're seeing in market and some of the challenges that we've seen with our customers and in actually doing that in practice, some of the pitfalls as well. We're going to talk a little bit about stakeholders. Stakeholders are, kind of an important consideration when building out a program, and we do see, some mistakes here in this particular category. So I'm going to talk a little bit about buy-in and some of the stakeholder groups that you should perhaps be engaging with within the organization. I'm also going to talk about deploying and distributing content. So what are the options out there for developing content, solutions for licensing, those types of things. And then I'm also going to talk about distribution because I think that that's kind of an important aspect of all of this and where we see some of the challenges and some of the friction when taking these opportunities to scale. I'm also going to talk about measuring employee success. So with employee success, we're going to talk about what we do at Cognitive 3D, specifically around, what are the opportunities in the evolution of metrics? What's different from kind of a traditional platform? What's the difference between this and perhaps your LMS? How do we actually take advantage of some of those human performance outcomes that we can gather up in VR and learn a little bit more about compliance, completion rates, and other things like that. I'm also going to talk a bit about a case study that we did with industrial VR training partner, and then I'm also going to provide a link to a 20-page guide that we have put together for scaling VR. So stick around for that, and I'll kind of walk you through how to get access to that after the presentation. So let's go ahead and get started. From our perspective, we've been at this for a while. Company was founded in 2015. 2016, we took our first product to market. We were thinking games entertainment all the way. Here goes the rocket ship. And, really where we found fit was in, training and simulation, consumer research, those types of uses. We're seeing, a lot of those projects from 2017 through to 2019 really come to that inflection point. We found our value proposition. The friction on platform is really going away. We've got a lot of, head-mounted display options. They're getting, cheaper, lighter, easier to use. And because of that, organizations are starting to think like we've built this, prototype POC. How do we actually take this to market? How do we, scale this within our enterprise? And what we're thinking and where we see, our more successful customers going is really looking at this as a fundamental part of a modern enterprise's learning ecosystem, right? How do we provide our employees a serious advantage over traditional enterprises? And these organizations are looking to immersive technology to provide, employees the opportunity to reskill, the opportunities to upskill, and give them greater ability to adapt to challenges and pitfalls that might kind of come their way. So VR training is not just about providing a new way to teach the exact same types of use cases, but it's also a competitive advantage. It gives you a better opportunity to allow your employees to reskill and upskill faster and retain that knowledge as they move from role to role within your organization. So one of the things that we see in early VR training prototypes, and we see them from day one napkin drawing all the way through to kind of scaled 100,000 headset deployments, right? And some of these things start in skunkworks and within innovation teams, and I think that within your organization, if that's where it works, that's fantastic. But I want to be really clear that it's important that you don't work behind closed doors and without feedback from the rest of the organization. Working in a vacuum can be a major pitfall, especially when it comes to the scaling in the scaling of the training within the organization. And it's actually been a pretty critical mistake from a number of different perspectives that's impacted future scalability. You get to the point where you've got, buy-in from a business unit, you've created your, initial scenarios, you've collected some POC and pilot data, it produces value. But then when it comes to scaling within the organization, you just haven't had any of the conversations that you need to make that tangible. So I think it's really important that you look at this as a team effort and bring people in even before you're ready, even before you're comfortable about and build maybe a working group within your organization, and build awareness between all the business units that are going to be supportive within the organization, but also you're starting to build your champions really early on in this process. I think it's really important not to stay confined to an island, or build in a vacuum, whatever you want to say, when you're building these proof of concepts and pilots. So I did want to talk about a few of them that we kind of see over and over, and sometimes they come in too late, sometimes not at all. And collaborating with business units can be really helpful in kind of taking your work forward. So the first one I wanted to touch on is IT. IT is really tasked in your organization to defend the organization from threats, loss of data, protecting devices and edges and endpoints. They have a lot of responsibility, and they're quite sensitive to new devices, new hardware. If you think about just the last couple of years, and even with the COVID-19 pandemic, they've been dealing with devices at home. They've been handling bring your own device, which could extend to mobile phones, tablets, all those types of things. And they've come up with solutions. They've worked with vendors, and they've come up with a strategy on how they're actually going to be able to move forward with those new technologies. Well, if you don't bring IT in early on in the discussion, they don't really have the opportunity to get comfortable with why the technology exists within the organization. They don't have the opportunity to get comfortable with the vendors that you might be working with already. And it also brings a lot of surprise to your process and deploying the technology, in that you might not actually know what it's actually going to be required to scale within your organization. So I think it's a really good opportunity for you to build a champion within IT. Get them a dev kit, make sure that they're aware, perhaps part of a committee or working group, and they can become a champion when it finally comes to deployment. And you, as the primary stakeholder here in building out this program, have good understanding and insight on what IT is going to require to actually scale and use this within your organization. It's one thing to provide guided demos on a one-by-one basis. It's another thing to make it a key component of the learning and development program within your organization. Now, with that said, let's talk about learning and development, or L&D, as I might refer to it later in the presentation. So, L&D is really critical to the success of your deployment in your program. And you might be starting your project in innovation, or wherever it might be. I think it's really important to build an L&D stakeholder, understand how are they delivering training today, what are the tools and technologies that they've invested in, potentially millions of dollars in constructing kind of these tools within the organization, and factoring that into your program and your overall capabilities. This group is responsible for designing the educational curriculum, aligning learning outcomes, but it's also responsible for reporting business objectives and outcomes to the rest of the organization. So I think it's really important to kind of involve L&D really early on within this particular effort that you might be doing, and figuring out how you can align, how you're going to be able to tie in and reduce the amount of friction in deploying immersive technology to the rest of the organization. The next piece I would talk about is unions, right? So if you've got organized labor within the organization, it's really important for you to communicate, especially if you're expecting them to use this technology and be trained on it. what are the capabilities? Why is it being brought in? What type of data is going to be collected? Why is it going to be used? And what is it going to be used for? And what is kind of the ultimate goal with deploying the technology? What type of collective agreements already exist that might govern some of these categories as well? So you might have some interested stakeholders on an individual employee basis that think this is a great idea, but it's also really important that you make sure that you understand the broader stakeholder here in organized labor, that they have input and a seat at the table when you're trying to figure out how you're going to scale this within the organization. When we're thinking about what are we going to deploy and what are we going to create, I hear a lot of customers think really specifically, like, how do I create an experience that 50,000 employees are going to use, or 5,000 employees, whatever it might be, right? And I think you need to kind of step back and think about what are the activities that can be made more emotionally engaging, and more a simulated basis. What are the activities that are really inconvenient to learn? So if you're talking to business unit stakeholders, like, what's hard to train? People, human capital, equipment, supplies, whatever it might be. What are the things that are hard to do right now, as opposed to what might already be addressed in kind of a legacy system, such as your learning management system that L&D might be working on? And also, what are opportunities where I can kind of take employees and stakeholders away from dangerous practices, or give them an opportunity to pre-flight on a particular activity before putting them in front of that danger. Sometimes I think that we try to go after the most scaled opportunity first, which I certainly understand it might provide the greatest overall impact, but you might already have something that addresses that particular training category, whereas the actual pain within your organization is actually much deeper seated. And your business stakeholders will be able to kind of surface those, especially if you're looking at it from these three angles. So why now? Why are we doing this now, right? So 2020 survey revealed that 56% of organizations are implementing some form of VRAR in the last year. 35% are considering using it, and 25% are fully deployed and looking to scale further. As I mentioned on our introduction here, I think that this is a strategic opportunity to gain competitive advantage. If you're able to train your team more effectively, make sure that they have better compliance and better understanding of the knowledge, tasks, and capabilities that they need to do their work effectively, safely, and without additional cost, I think that you have a lot of opportunities to harness immersive technology in your favor. So let's talk about developing a content at scale, right? So typically when I talk to customers, there's two different types of categories here. There's folks that are interested in developing proprietary content. So that's content that's really specific to your business, might have really specific equipment, facilities that are completely custom to, perhaps a digital twin of a space that you already have that you're looking to provide training on. And then there's general skills training, right? So these are just trying to demonstrate particular concepts, but they don't need to be specific to your business. So these could be licensed from, studios. This could be like, as simple as a conflict resolution scenario in soft skills, all the way through to, confined space scenarios where, the general understanding and concepts that are being taught are, similar among most modules. So there's two different vendors that I wanted to highlight here today that we work with. The first one is Tailspin. Tailspin does a really great job on the soft skills training, and they also have a tool set called Copilot, which is really cool, in that it allows you to actually author, various soft skills environments that are custom to your needs. So I think that that's kind of a halfway in between, where you're saying, I want to do soft skills training, but I have a specific process that I want to teach that's specific to our business. Tailspin provides you that opportunity to create that capability. Another example would be Pixel VR. They have a number of off-the-shelf modules that you can license from them. And one of the examples I provided earlier, the confined space training, you can license that off the shelf and put that in front of, any workforce that you have within your organization that deals in confined space, and train them on that particular module without taking on the cost as well as the time required to actually build something from scratch, proprietary to your organization. The next piece is really around distributing VR content at scale. So there's a few considerations that I think you need to make around this particular category. And this is the category that, IT as a stakeholder is actually going to be most interested in. The first one is really accessibility. And so when I'm talking about accessibility, I'm talking more about how are people going to get access to this content, and what is your deployment model effectively, right? So is this going to be a tethered experience deployed as a fixed space, such as like a training room or something on those lines? Or are you going to do an all-in-one and distribute these devices kind of throughout the organization, either as an individual device that becomes in the hands of your employee, or perhaps passed around a number of different individuals within a particular group of the organization. This accessibility category kind of informs the remainder of the elements here, for distributing content at scale, because I think it's really important to understand that once you figure out how training is going to be delivered, then you can kind of figure out all the remaining aspects on how are we going to authenticate them, how are we going to deal with access, those types of things as well. So the next piece that we see a lot is really around onboarding, right? And onboarding for me, especially when we're thinking about scale, is not necessarily put on the headset and do the module. It's more about who is this person? What content do they get access to? So in a typical learning management system provided by L&D, there's access control. There's tools that provide what modules the employee is going to be able to access, what particular order or sequence those modules need to be completed in, some of the prerequisites that might be required before moving through that content. So I think content access is actually a really important piece you need to think about, as well. And the last one on that category is really around cadence, right? So how often are we going to allow them to move through the simulation before retrying again, and what cadence is that content going to be consumed on? The next piece is really around the management, right? So we're thinking about, mobile device management, software updates, operating system upgrades, security patches, those types of things. And that's absolutely critical for any new device that's going to be managed by your organization moving forward. And you're in this category, if you're looking to scale your deployment within the enterprise. So there is solutions out there on the market. Arbor XR is one of them that I wanted to highlight today. They have a great tool for distributing assets to all-in-one devices, and they give us that capability to tie into MDM solutions as well, including solutions that your employees might already your IT team might already be familiar with. So the next part, and one of my favorite topics in this particular area, is really around measuring VR training at scale, right? So how are we going to do this on a distributed basis? What type of data can we collect from a 3D environment, as well as that employee's engagement through the headset, the controllers, or even additional sensors if needed? What do we need to collect, right? What are the things that are actually essential for understanding perhaps compliance, situational awareness, and a variety of other outcomes from that environment? How are we going to integrate that within our existing tools, right? So how do we make that visible to perhaps learning management system or other investments within the organization? And the analysis, right? Like, what can I learn from these modules? What can I learn about particular employee behavior that might make me improve the way that I'm constructing my simulations and the opportunities to extract data and insights from them? So I wanted to give you just a quick brief on what I call the evolution of metrics. So in this particular case, we're going to talk a little bit about web and mobile. You think about web, we're talking about like Google Analytics, Urchin back in the day, we're trying to understand clicks, typing, page views, those types of things. Very passive, 2D behavioral data, log files, those types of things. Then came mobile, right? Then became more about funnel and understanding a user's progression towards a particular KPI. So that KPI could be something like, how long did somebody spend within this application? That's a good, KPI if you're trying to draw attention and eyeballs. But there's a lot of new capabilities too. So new capabilities included, touch screens, taps, there was buttons, cameras, gyroscopes, all sorts of new kind of sensor capabilities. Then along comes VR and AR, and fundamental shift, like huge. Let's talk about the differences here, right? Mobile and web, these are things that are in front of me that I'm consuming. In VR and AR, the user has agency. They're literally in the experience. They can contribute to that experience. They offer creative chaos and how they interact with that experience. And there's also a lot of new capability within those platforms as well. So we're talking about things like eye tracking, right? So what are the users looking at and how are they gazing and fixating within a particular environment? Head movement, right? So that can help us understand, how they move their head around and how they engage in the content that you put in front of them. The next piece is around positioning, right? If I have a large simulation and the user can move throughout it, what is the path that is most likely taken? And what can I learn about that path that might give me some understanding around performance? Hand movement, so you'll notice that I move my hands a lot. How people are moving their hands within the environment, or even hand controllers. And biometrics, right? There's lots of biometrics that we can use that are not, super invasive. I'm talking about things like heart rate, so being able to understand kind of the, biometric response to particular stimuli, right? So if I've got like a cabin depressurization scenario or something like that, heart rate could tell me a lot about, if the user's staying calm and how they're handling themselves within a particular scenario, or even things like cognitive load, like HP's Omnicept. They've got a built-in cognitive load metric that can help us understand, what the user's cognitive load is, in a particular emergency situation and how they might be able to manage that as they move through a particular set of stimuli. So, during the proof of concept and POC stage, most of our customers are focused on concerning themselves with viability. So they're talking about kind of qualitative measures, anecdotal measures. Are our employees comfortable with using VR? Do they enjoy the experience where they engage with the simulation? Might go a little bit deeper there. What level of compliance do we see, measured from that scenario? Do we see better outcomes once we put that trainee back in the field? There's a variety of different kind of anecdotal measures that you can take from VR-based scenarios. But the real question is, how do we scale that? How do we make it programmatic? How do we collect that data without bias? How do we do it automatically? So this can be deployed at scale within the organization without a army of people to actually collect the data and understand how those users are engaging. So, when we're looking at immersive technology, what we focus on is collecting behavioral data on how people interact with a particular environment. What are they looking at? How are they engaging? And really, this is kind of the spreadsheet for, this type of engagement. If we look at like mobile and web, a CSV or event-based data pipeline might do it for you in terms of collecting, user did X, Y, and then Z. But when you're dealing with immersive technology, there's just so much more that you can really understand within a particular experience. And that's what we're looking at here. This tool here, it's called Scene Explorer. It's an after action review. And this is a representation of what does the raw data look like, right? How do we actually collect that raw data? How do we do it remotely? Centralize it and then assess it without bias. So VR gives us that capability to get that deeper level of insight and holistically measure behavior, as opposed to kind of taking that surface level pass fail look at training modules. Being able to look at, did users hesitate before proceeding with tasks? Did we see them, fail at a higher rate? Does heart rate during high pressure situations affect competency? Does time, that a user takes to notice hazards affect the success that they're going to have within a particular simulation? So there's lots of different ways you can kind of mash this data up to get a better view and understanding of how that user is engaging within space and what we can learn about compliance. The way that we've done this at Cognitive 3D is created a structured process on how employees are behaving and then boiling that down into behavioral patterns. right? Being able to look at sequential data. So user did X and then they did Y and then they did Z. That gives us the ability to assess event-based telemetry through to gaze and fixation, as well as biometric sensors as well, to be able to provide a very specific outcome around compliance for your users as they move through a particular simulation. Once we have that assessment and we've created that data pipeline, we've got that raw data, we've created our assessments that are mapped to what our organization needs from a KPI perspective, then the next piece is how do I make that and scale that within the organization? So while immersive technology is new, especially if you're dealing with your L&D team and they've been training your employees for decades, it doesn't necessarily have to be isolated, right? And I think that, this is another one of those pitfalls where I think that we don't want to build our technology and our solution in a vacuum. If your L&D team has an existing learning management system or other related institutional systems that they might want to tie this data into, this is your best opportunity at scaling, right? Working with those systems, figuring out how you're going to get that data out of those, out of the immersive platform and into the LMS system gives you that opportunity to have centralized measurement where content can be evaluated for user performance using the holistic view of what is available on immersive technology, and those results can still be stored within those traditional systems, just like any other learning activity. It's also going to give you that opportunity for discovery. It's going to give you an opportunity to put that into a place where it can be discovered within with your employees as well as other stakeholders within the organization. So we think about scaling, VR training. It's not necessarily about the number of headsets that you have or the number of courses that you've built. It's really about connecting outcomes from VR training with the rest of the organization and providing holistic end-to-end value for not just yourself and the tools and capabilities that you're building, but for the overall stakeholders and learning program. VR training, another success area would be, VR should be a part of the day-to-day experience for new and existing employees. And we also want to make sure that those results are not isolated. We really want to make sure that we evaluate that completion and compliance with the best possible data and the richness that immersive technology offers. But we also want to make sure that we respect the existing systems and capabilities that your learning and development team is invested in and make sure that that data lives in the appropriate places. So let's talk about our training case study that I mentioned at the beginning. This was a medium-sized power utility company developing a training proof of concept. So we measured 3 different criteria. We were looking at, can the user perform the step? Can they perform it in the right sequence? And can they complete the step correctly? And what we did is we actually did 3 days of training in a row to be able to measure the retention of the user's ability to do this, and saw a 59% increase in knowledge retention, 40% increase in compliance, and a 20% increase in task duration. Now, what's important to mention here is that these numbers are based off not just the most skilled workers that they had, but also the newest workers that they had as well. And we still saw huge amounts of knowledge retention in our most seasoned employees in their ability to retain the proper processes that the organization wants. So that cadence of retraining and reskilling those existing employees that you had, immersive technology is a great way to do that, and a great kind of standard that employees can kind of use to test their knowledge and ensure that they're following the appropriate processes. Next steps, right? So modern enterprises, more than ever before, we're not seeing this technology slow down in any way. Enterprises are having to adapt how they train, especially with COVID-19 and the pandemic. How do we do this on a distributed basis? How do we adapt faster and provide opportunities for learners to pick up and reskill as quickly as possible? And I think immersive technology unlocks a lot of those capabilities. There's also a lot of pressures from your employees and workforce as well. Staying updated with new trends and information. A lot of employees leave their organizations for new challenges and new opportunities. Immersive technology is a great opportunity to allow employees to stay engaged with new learning opportunities and new skills. And I think that a comprehensive L&D ecosystem that includes VR is going to give your employees as well as your organization the competitive advantage that they need to accelerate learning outcomes as well as the retention of that knowledge within your workforce. So, with all that said, I would like to present the enterprise guide for scaling VR training. This is a nice, kind of quick guide that you can download off our website. You don't actually have to use the URL shown on the screen. If you just go to cognitive3d.com, it's right on the homepage. It has basically everything that we talked about today, specifically around sustainable training content pipeline. We talk obviously about analytics, and there's a bit of a deeper dive there in terms of the types of capabilities and some more use cases and capabilities there. Best practices for introducing technology within your organization. So I do a bit of a deeper dive within the guide as well. And then we also talk about those stakeholders in a little bit of detail as well. Feel free to take a look at the guide. If you have any questions for me, my name's Tony Bevilacqua, CEO of Cognitive 3D, and you can find me at Tony at cognitive3d.com. I appreciate you sticking with me through this presentation, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions or interested in learning more. Thank you.